This video shows you how to find the area of rectangles. Area is the space inside a 2D shape. Therefore, it is measured in square units, so square centimetres, square metres, square millimetres, or maybe even, if appropriate, square kilometres. So really, you can see with the square that I've just drawn here, there are, if I'm using the bigger squares, there are 1, 2, 3, 4. So the area of this rectangle, square here, is 4 square units. I might have done that by counting them individually. I might have done that by thinking of it as an array, knowing it's 2 times 2. Or I might have done it by applying a formula. So that's what we'll show in here. You can apply the same thinking to squares as you do to rectangles. So 3 ways to find the area in square units, space inside a 2D shape. You could count all the squares inside the rectangle if you're using grid paper like we are today. We want to move away from that if we can, because it's probably the least efficient method. It'll work, but let's try and move away from it and use one of the other 2 methods listed here. Okay, so maybe this method or that method. So really, if you can think of the squares inside the rectangle, the space inside the rectangle, like an array, to either skip count, maybe go 2, 4, or knowing your multiplication and knowing it's an array, to multiply 2 times 2 to give you the 4 squares. That is fantastic thinking as well, moving away from counting individually. The last thing is, if you're not using grid paper, to find the area inside a square or a rectangle, you can just simply multiply the length by the width. So the length and the width might be given, or you might be able to use a ruler to find the length and the width, then multiply them together to find the area of that rectangle in square units. Let's look at finding the area of these rectangles in square centimetres. You can see that I've got a scale here showing that the distance there is equal to 1 centimetre, showing that the space that one of these bigger squares takes up is 1 square centimetre. That corresponds to 1 in there. So you could simply count the squares inside. How many square centimetres are there in this rectangle? You could count them all individually. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. All the way up until you calculate that there are 24 square centimetres in here. That is how we write 24 square centimetres. That isn't a very efficient method. You can see that I paused and did it outside of recording because it would have taken a while. Again, it works. It shows that you understand what the area is, but we want to try and find some more efficient methods. Let's try something more efficient on here, and maybe try and skip count might be helpful to you. You might know that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in the top row. So you might be able to do then skip count or use repeated addition to then work out how many square centimetres are there in the area of this rectangle. You can see it is hopefully the same size as the top one. So we might go 6, 12, 18, 24. So you can see that method works to find that the area of this rectangle is 24 square centimetres. Slightly more efficient, but there are a couple more ways that we want to try and get towards or start putting into place to find the area of rectangles. Let's now look at some more efficient ways to find the area of a rectangle, the space inside a 2D shape, which is, in this case, a rectangle. And so here, refer to my scale. This distance here, I'm saying is 1 meter. So one of these big or stronger line boxes is 1 square meter. So a great way to think about area is to think like it as an array. So there are, as we know, a whole lot of smaller squares inside a rectangle, okay? Whether you draw them, see them, or whether you don't, all those little square meters inside this rectangle. So think of it like an array, like multiplication. How many are there on one side? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 10 meters is the length of that side. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 down this way. So then, multiplication, there are 4 rows of 10. So 4 times by 10 gives us 40 square meters. That then shortcuts us to possibly the most efficient way is just look at how long the side lengths are. This one, because it's the same one as above, is 10 meters. And this one is 4 meters. To find the area of a rectangle, all you need to do is multiply the length times by the width. So the length in this one is 10 meters. The width is 4 meters. So 10 times 4 is 40 square meters. Remembering area is a square unit because we're finding the space inside the shape. So it is 40 square meters. Let's look at some examples without grid paper. Finally, without the grid paper, we can still find the area of all these rectangles by knowing that there are smaller square centimeters, millimeters, or meters inside this shape, and just use the formula of length times width. So for the first one here, the area will be equal to the length times by the width. So that's going to be equal to 8 times by 7. 8 sevens are 56. So the area of this rectangle is going to be 56 centimeters squared. Remember that area is a squared unit because it's the space inside the shape. Same thing with this one over here. The area is going to be equal to the length times the width. So it's going to be equal to 13 times by the width of 5. 13 times by 5 is equal to 65. So the area of this rectangle here is 65 square meters. Again, even if you start to deal with numbers into decimals, they might both be decimals. With this one it isn't. You can still apply the exact same formula of area equal to length times width. Here the length is 10, so it's a nice friendly number, times by the length of 6.2 millimeters, giving us an area of 10 times 6.2 is 62 square millimeters. Points to remember are area is measured by square units because it is the space inside a 2D shape. So that might be square centimeters, square millimeters, or square meters. You can use methods by counting all the individual squares inside if you've got grid paper, maybe by skip counting or thinking like of it as an array and use multiplication, or if you understand that the area is equal to the length times the width, you can simply do this and even sometimes just use your ruler to find the length times the width.